everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today, in a little bit different setting, in the sunroom at my house. We're not down at the range. We don't have the picnic table of knowledge with us today, but hopefully I can say some things that sound somewhat intelligent. So I've been, obviously I've got a Gen 6 Glock, the Gen 6 Glock 17, and I've been kind of aware recently of some problems people have been talking about with the Gen 6 Glocks in relation to the trigger shoe. Now, I hadn't really noticed it until I heard about it, and then I started kind of looking into it a little bit more, and I have noticed some interesting things in the Gen 6 Glock system around the trigger shoe and the trigger bar and all that, that does make it seem like there's some flex in the trigger shoe. And I think, this is my theory, this may or may not be true, I think that the problem may lie more in the trigger bar itself. And so, to show you kind of why I have that theory, I've got 3 similar guns that I would like to show you kind of what I've found. So, I've got the most similar right here. This is going to be a Gen 5 Glock 48. Now I will note that I do have a Daniel Fitch Defense trigger shoe in here. Now the trigger bar and everything else internally on this gun are the exact same. Just the trigger shoe itself is different. So I realize it's not a perfect Glock analog experimental comparison. We're not really about major science here on this channel, but it'll do as a comparison. And then the second most similar I have is going to be my Ruger RXM. This one has fully stock trigger shoe, trigger bar, all that in there. So this will be a good comparison. And then as kind of a control, a gun that I know has no trigger shoe or trigger bar flex is going to be the CZ P10F. And the reason I know it has no trigger bar and trigger shoe flex is it's extremely solid. It's got one of the most crisp triggers available on a striker fire handgun, and then the trigger bar itself is not asymmetric like a Glock trigger bar, so it is very non-flexible. Randy, one more time, I'm gonna have to lock you out, bud. Okay. All right. So, I'm gonna change camera angles real quick, and I'm gonna kind of show you what I'm talking about. So, showing trigger bar flex is going to be kind of difficult in the first part of the trigger pull here. Well, hopefully this will focus. Might have to hold it out a sec. But you can see it a lot easier once the trigger is pulled when you're at the very back. So right here, you'll notice that trigger seems like it's flexing back into the frame a little bit more. So now I understand that this is not at a part of the trigger pull where the flex really matters, but this is a part of the trigger pull where you can actually see the flex. So stay there, Randy. I'm going to show you on this Glock 48 real quick. Same part of the trigger pull, no flex. Okay, no flex once you get to the frame, that is, okay? Got our Ruger RXM, trigger pull. A little bit more flex than that 48, but it's a lot less than the Glock 17 Gen 6. Then I've got my P10. Okay. Once again, there's zero flex on this one. It doesn't even move back. So I'm going to break these guns down and kind of show you what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to draw a comparison that might fall on deaf ears to some, but to others it may make perfect sense. So I've got this Gen 6 broken apart And I'm going to show you kind of what I think the problem is that's causing this sensation of flex in the trigger shoe. I think it's actually the trigger bar that's flexing. And I'll show you. So I've got the trigger pull all the way back right here. And so, this is more for demonstration purposes. I realize that this is a different situation than the trigger pull, but I can show you where I think the weak point is. So hopefully this will, there we go. Okay, so now watch the trigger bar when I pull back. Can you see that? So what I'm seeing here is the trigger bar is flexing out, and it's even pushing into this slide release a little bit. Slide release, slide lock, whatever you want to call it. So it's a lot of flex in that system. Now you may not even be able to see this on camera at all, but flex in the trigger bar itself is what I am seeing a lot more of on this. Compared to Glock 48. It's a little bit more, but it's not flexing out in the same way. Right? RXM, same deal. It's actually got it's got more flex than the 48, but it's not flexing out into the frame as much. And of course we've got the P10, which is going to have 0 because that trigger bar runs on both sides of the frame. So that is what I think the problem is a combination of maybe the trigger shoe, but mostly I think the trigger bar might not be a stiffer, a metal that's as stiff, which is causing some kind of, I would say just a less efficient power transfer from the shoe through the bar into the parts that are going to ultimately send the bullet downrange. So all that combined with that flex in there and that trigger bar with that power transfer system to the rear is causing for like a less responsive, more mushy trigger pull. Now, what I'm going to do real quick is just kind of draw a quick comparison to something non-related to guns. Another very expensive hobby that unfortunately I've been into for a while. I almost forgot to show this, so sorry for the quick weird cut. I'd like to show you the trigger shoes themselves not flexing. So I'm going to use this trigger without the hinged part here. So I'm just going to pull it back against the frame. So there's like no flex at all. It feels much different than when this is pulled back. So eliminating the trigger bar from the system, I have no flex. With the P10, feels very much the same. That trigger shoe feels just as stiff as the Gen 6. With the Daniel Fitch, oop, I pressed it on accident. Oop, did it again. Same deal, no flex. With the RXM, same deal, no flex. So, just to clarify, when I'm pulling on the trigger shoe without engaging that trigger safety right there, I'm able to basically take the trigger bar out of the equation and only test the flexiness of the trigger shoe itself. So that's how I'm kind of determining that maybe the trigger bar is the problem and the trigger shoe itself is fine. Okay, so try not to judge me too harshly for this. Before I got really into shooting guns and all that, I was for lack of a better descriptor, a semi-professional cyclist. So I get it. I was one of those people. I tried not to be annoying about it, but I was very into it. Did a lot of racing. I worked at bike shops at one point, and during that time, I wouldn't say I was ever an engineer by any means, but I got to understand how engineering in a system ultimately leads to more responsiveness, efficiency, and power transfer. So the parallel I'm going to draw is here on this low to mid-end, high-end race bike. So here's my parallel. Your cycling shoe, which is built to be stiff, is going to be your trigger shoe. Your crank arm is going to be your trigger bar, and then all this, your drivetrain, is what is going to be your like sear and all that, your striker. So if your cycling shoe flexes, which this is a high-end shoe, it's got a carbon fiber sole, there is zero flex in this system, nothing you can do to flex that. That's going to lead to responsiveness, power transfer, and no wasted energy through flexing into this system. This shoe has a nylon sole, and it will flex. Now this is fine, this gets the job done, but you have less responsiveness, less efficiency with a shoe like this. This crank arm is a very nice one. It's made by Shimano. Fully like aluminum, very stiff. This leads to very good power transfer because that crank arm is not flexing and robbing you of energy. So this, if it were to flex, would be bad. So what I'm saying is the Glock trigger bar is flexing, and it's ultimately the weak point, which is what's causing the kind of mushy, non-responsive feeling in the Glock Gen 6 trigger system. So there may be a little bit more flex in the Gen 6 shoe. I think there's definitely more flex in the trigger bar from what I can tell. Now this is all just a working theory. I can't prove this. I don't have the tools to do this. This is kind of just something for you guys to think about and maybe test if you can. But that's where I think the problem is. I think that's what's causing the Gen 6 trigger shoe problems, is more of a trigger shoe and a trigger bar problem combined. So thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Hopefully this helps. Maybe this is really stupid, whatever. Regardless, it's a data point for people to look at, and this is my theory on what's going on. Thank you. Bye.